Hey everyone, do you want to look at using a programmatic way in order to extract rental data that's accurate as well as super useful for you as a landlord? You could even do this at scale. Well, I'm going to show you how to do that using the Realty Mole Property API in just a few easy steps with Python. We're going to cover how to take one single property and be able to extract rental information really easily with just a few lines of code. And that way you can streamline your process to do this across multiple properties. My name is Ariel Herrera with the AnalyticsAriel channel, where we bridge the gap between real estate and technology. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel so you get the latest content, as well as like us on social media. All right, let's get started. So right now I'm on Realty Mole's API page on Rapid API, which is a marketplace for other APIs. And if we just backtrack to Realty Mole's homepage, what they provide is real estate data. I believe they source this from the MLS. However, you could always reach out to them to confirm. Now they have two main endpoints that are on Rapid API, which is the rent estimate that we're going to cover, and the property data, which we covered in the past when looking at comparables. So what's really great here is for the rent estimate, it gives us a view as to what other properties have been rented within the area so that we can look at ones that are comparable, and it gives us some statistics so we can actually see how similar are these properties to the one that I'm looking to rent out. Is the correlation score closer to 1 or to 0? And on this site, so you see on the left-hand side for developers, there's several endpoints which I encourage to go through them. As a disclaimer, it is free to sign up. So you first sign up for Rapid API, the marketplace, and then where it says test endpoints, you're going to hit subscribe, and it'll now say test endpoints afterwards. What's really great about this, which I did not like about Rentometer, is Rentometer you have to pay to even try and test out the API, whereas here you can use 50 polls, 50 quotes to the API for free. After that, it is 3 cents each, which is pretty low. But if you have some sort of system where you're looking at 2,000 plus properties, I mean, $40 a month is not that bad when you look at the potential profit you can have from a deal. So going back to the API, what rent estimate has as the parameters are several. So we can input the comp count as to how many comparables we want to see returned. On the higher end 10, lower end 3. We could also specify the square footage of our property, as well as the bathrooms, days old. So it needs to be at least 15 of comparable rentals. And we could also pass in information like the address. And what's really important here is property type. So I highly encourage, if you're not going to use any other filters, always filter on this one. As it could be very different renting out a property. It's a single family home versus one that's attached to another unit or another building, as we live in a time right now due to COVID that people like space and people like to live in proximity away from neighbors. So what does this API ultimately return for us? And what is really awesome is that Realty Mole, since they are the providers of this API, sometimes we'll get some third-party providers here, but they're the actual ones. They have really good documentation along here. As you see, they have all of the descriptions, and they also allow you, without ever testing the endpoint, just looking at example responses. So their example here is 5500 Grand Lake Drive in San Antonio, Texas. And some of the parameters or fields we get back is what they believe the rent should go for. So this is an estimate. On the low end, on the high end, what it could go for. What's basing it off the latitude and longitude of this property. And then what's really neat is that in the sample, they return 5 different listings. And within these listings, we not only get the properties that are similar, that rented similar rentals to this property, we also get the location of them. We get the price that they rented at, the distance, stays old, and this correlation score, which I don't believe we saw in Rentometer. Rentometer is priced way higher, yet it did not have this score. All right, so now how do we actually apply this into Python? So right now I am on Google Colab, which is a really awesome notebook, similar to Jupyter Notebooks, but the best part is that you don't have to download Python locally. So say if you've never worked with Python before, or you've dealt with the hassles of having different versions, you could just copy over this notebook and run it. So the first thing we're going to do is you got to make sure you have your API key for Rapid API and you subscribe to Realty Mole. Next is we're actually going to output at the end these comparable rental properties on a Google Maps. So in order to do that, we need to install Gmaps, IPy widgets, and widgets extension, which I already have downloaded. And the packages that we want to install work with Google Colab. So I'm going to pull my API keys here, request in order to be able to make the API call. Especially we need pandas to transform this into a tabular format, into a data frame, which is my native way of viewing things. And then, oh yeah, we can also see a table of contents here if you want to skip around. All right, so we have one single function, really easy here, is there's just a couple of main parts. So for Realty Mole, you have to pass in an address, and I try to make this easier by allowing you to just enter street name, city, state. I can concatenate that for you into one single string. And then each of those parameters that were specified in the API are also parameters in this function, which could then are the payloads, which could then be put into the request, which you're basically requesting to get this data, which is why it's get. And then you ultimately return the response of what this API has returned, which is the data. Moving on to read in my file, which is called API-keys.csv. And this is allowing me to get two separate keys. One is for Rapid API and the second is for Google, which I'll show you how to do that right now. I'm not going to dive into a whole walkthrough because that would just be out of scope. However, this guy Elliot has already done it on the Medium. His post is getting started with Google Maps in Python. He gives a really quick tutorial, 3-minute read, and you can quickly get your API key and understand how to use Gmaps within Python. Now, moving on, we're actually not going to look at 122 or 728, which we have done in the past for these two addresses. We're going to look at 113 George Street. This property we talked about in the last video. We could see it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, within South Amboy, which is a town in New Jersey that is close to the water and has transportation. So this house is currently listed for sale, but let's just imagine that we own the property and we're thinking, hey, if we could rent it out for a great price that's going to cover the mortgage and we're going to have substantial cash flow, maybe we'll take it off the market and we'll actually rent it out instead. This is a property looks at front. It does not have a driveway, which if we compare it to other properties that do, we do have to subtract that out. However, it is in an area, if we go to the maps, that's really nice because it's right by the water. It's across from the train line. And me being a local to this area, I know for a fact that there's a lot of street parking here. So I don't think you'd ever have issues of parking and then walking straight to the house, which is what a renter looks for, is not to have an extra headache. They want convenience. So now using this API, I can pass in the street, city, and state, which we specified. It is a single family. It's 2-bedroom, 3 baths. We have that. And we want to get properties that are within a 1-year time frame. So I know when we talked about comparables for selling, for listing, or offering down for a property, looking at comparables, we don't want to look that far out. That's a little bit different for rentals because since it's very seasonal, meaning that a lot of renters come on in the summertime of looking for rent, and you may not be able to rent a property the same as the summertime versus the winter time. I did select 360 for days out, so I could also get a flavor of rental properties that sold in the same time period, which is in March of 2020. So once we run this, we do get a response, which is the same response as we saw in the example for the API. We are able to get a set of listings, 5 in this case, where we have information of the property itself, the distance away from our subject property, as well as the rental price and a correlation score. Of course, this isn't that friendly to look at, so we could do quickly because Realty Mole is a lovely API that has made this super easy to transform. View this in JSON format, specify we only want to look at listings, and wrap it in Pandas data frame to have it in a tabular format, which if we wanted to, we could just go straight into Excel with this, but let's keep it here for right now. Now what I want to do is plot this so I can see how far away these properties are. And down here, all I'm doing is specifying I want the latitude column, I want the longitude column, and I want these two zipped into a list. I then go into Google, the Gmaps library, which lets me pass in my Google API key, and I'm able to use this marker layer to pass in zip lat lon, which is this list over here. And because it's in Google Colab, I have to first export this to an HTML to then view it within here, which is something that took a little bit of time to figure out, but was able to see that. And now we get a lovely view of where these related properties are to the one that we're looking to rent out. Now, don't fault me here. It says for development purposes only because I went past my free credit on Google and I do not want to pay for more credits as of right now. However, highlights is that we can see really easily that these properties are all pretty close to the property that we're trying to rent out. Can we now find one that's completely comparable? So what's great is that we have a return of correlation score. So say if we want to look at 10 properties instead of the 5, we could always narrow down where, hey, if it's below 0.85, that means it's less similar to our property that we're looking to rent, so let's just discard those. That's a really great sense to quickly gauge what properties you want to focus on for rental comparisons. So we have one here, which is the highest correlation score, so the most similar, 119 John Street, which I know should be around the corner. It's also a 3-bed, 2.5 bath. This was 2-bath. And the square footage, 1592. Which I believe is similar to this one. So if we back out to the original posting, 1,500 square feet, so very similar. So what we do next, we want to actually look at this property and we want to see if the finishes on the inside are also similar to the finishes for our property. And what do we see? So let's refresh. This property goes for 2,800. And this is redone. So this is beautifully updated interior, boasts ceramic floor, fresh paint. So it's definitely a different view than the one that we're looking at. So automatically this is telling me we're not going to be able to rent this for as high as this one. And we see everything's pretty much updated. It has a finished backyard, which again, COVID times, people want space, so a renter may pay more for that. In property laundry, which is not always the case in South Amboy. And the bedrooms seem like okay space, a good amount of space, even a little section to work from home. So knowing the area, I would automatically say, okay, it has a better kitchen, so probably knock down at least 100 there. Has the outdoor backyard space, knock at least another 100. And the whole thing is finished, so knock down a little bit more there too. But it is really close. So at this stage, I'm probably just ballparking and thinking I could rent it out for the maximum 2,500 based on how the property that we're looking at isn't as finished as this one. So now if we look at the second one, 255 Catherine Street. Again, we're ultimately just trying to find a property that has similar finishes. But we could see that this is a completely different house. So it doesn't have that older view. It must have been built within the last 50 years. Oh, actually 2006. Yeah, so that wouldn't be a fair comparison. And let's keep going. So this is not going to always be the case as difficult for whatever town you're looking in, but South Amboy is so small that I am choosing a very difficult problem here. So in order for us to see how to rent or estimate rent when it's not as straightforward, when you don't have so many rentals with data here available. Okay, so this is really similar in the kitchen space. It looks like secluded, but this may be one of the best comparables that we can probably get to in terms of how recently it's been updated. And this one doesn't look to be as close to the train station, so our property probably has that going for it, whereas this one has more space. So I think those two can kind of cancel out. And if we go back here, this is renting for 28. Don't think we could go as high as that. So the rental estimate was $25.84 over here, which, yeah, is kind of in line with what we were thinking of based on that first property, the finishes, and then subtracting out what we don't have from the price. At the high, 28, at the low, 26. I'm going to look at one last one, and then we can come to a conclusion of what we would do next. This is great because it's right by the train station, actually. So in terms of distance, it is a pretty fair comparable. And it looks to be a little bit of an older property, which ours is. It is 1914, same year. Awesome. So we're getting a lot closer to a fair comparable. And yes, it looks a little worse in terms of datedness than ours. So let's see. It rented for 22. So at least we know at this stage we could definitely rent it for more than 22 because, I mean, it doesn't have clear photos to engage the right type of or the highest quality of renters. Doesn't look to be as updated as the one that we currently are looking at. So I would agree that at the low, probably the 23. I would agree also with the rent. I'd probably put it up for 25 based on the qualities of it being so close to this one and the features that it missed. So one important thing, which I'll note more in a different video of how to actually put your property for rent, is you want to look at trends. So when I first put my property in South Amboy for rent, I think the high was 22. Yet that's what I put it at. And the reason being was because during that time in COVID, a lot of people were looking to get out of apartments and into single family homes, especially from New York. And when you come from people coming from New York, they're used to higher prices. So $2,200 for a 2-bedroom was, for a lot of them, a steal. And that's why within only a week's time frame, I had about 5 people apply for the property. So definitely keep this in mind on what the trends are, and if they're favoring to you, you can try to push a little bit more towards the higher rent. And if you don't get the response rate that you believe you should have in a week's time, then I would drop that down, which would be highly marketable because people would see, oh wow, this is on sale, someone's going to jump on it, let's jump on it soon. But definitely don't let something sit for rent for, say, 30 plus days without changing the price. All right, so this was a great overview of how to use this API. Feel free to copy this from the notes as well. Please subscribe to this channel. Thanks so much.